there we go. So we'll start off just by setting our intentions, which has been our customary practice here. Setting of intentions also goes hand in hand with kind of taking a little self-inventory. So sometimes just from rushing to maybe get here, or in my case, sometimes rushing to put study guides together, things like this, you can notice that there's a little bit of this agitation in yourself. And then sometimes it's as simple as reminding yourself, oh, okay, well, I've arrived, so now here we are. There's no more hurry. What could be done is done, and, so we can let go of some of those things. So just a little self-inventory can be helpful. So I like to do that, look for anything that is maybe not going to be so helpful to me as I meditate. So letting go of any of those negative states and cultivating the positive intention that we're here to practice meditation, to learn mindfulness techniques in order to help us be happier, more well-rounded human beings, in order to be better friends and partners and children and parents. And then it's also helpful sometimes to offer the benefit of our practice to other beings. In this way, we're letting go of greed, and it cultivates generosity. So may the merit of our practice here today go to the benefit of all beings, not just us, but may go to all others as well. So with that, I'll sound the bell. Let there be peace. Let there be peace. Let there be peace. Welcome, everyone. We will do our guided meditation. So anybody who wants to move around or change positions, feel free to do that. Get as comfortable as you can. And sometimes people wonder, is it okay to move once we start the meditation? And it is perfectly fine. If you find that you're a little uncomfortable after a while, feel free to move, change positions, anything you'd like to do to feel more comfortable as we go. Otherwise, sometimes meditation can become an endurance contest where you're just trying to endure discomfort, and then it limits the amount of work that you can do with the mindfulness practice. So getting comfortable in the body, letting your eyes close softly. So maybe I'll just have Lucy come here. Lucy? Or do you want to just make sure she's okay there? That's fine. Yeah. Okay. Come here.
Do you want this over there?
No, that's fine. There you go. She's not so good at reverse. Most dogs aren't. Most dogs don't do reverse very well. She's no exception. So, all right. Okay, so let's kind of prepare ourselves for the meditation. Closing the eyes, if you're comfortable doing that. The reason we do that is to eliminate visual distractions. Otherwise, when we look around, we tend to think about the things we look at. So it is one very good way of eliminating distractions. If possible, let your breath flow through your nose. If you need to breathe through your mouth, again, that's fine. But if you can breathe through your nose, that's helpful. And look for a degree of symmetry in the body. So whether you're sitting or kneeling or laying, whatever posture you're in, having your weight distributed evenly on both sides of your body so that you're not exerting one side of muscles over the other, and that can lead to some stiffness or fatigue. So finding this place of balance in your own body. And if you're sitting or kneeling, it can also be helpful to tuck your chin in just ever so slightly, just the tiniest bit. It will take some of the pressure off the back of the neck and spine. So here, from where we are, I'll sound the bell and I'll start to guide us through the meditation. So just let yourself follow the sound of the bell into silence. And let the silence be a very warm, welcoming invitation to turn your senses inward. This is a perfect opportunity to let go of the habit of the mind of being projected outward. We're usually engaged with the outside world. We're thinking about things out there. But in the peacefulness and stability of our posture, of being present here, we can find this place of stability and refuge and peace. And just become aware of the feeling of being present in your own body, what it feels like to be sitting here, to be listening to these words. Just establish that sense of presence. And then with that sense of presence established, let's all bring our awareness up to the top of the head, up to the area of the scalp, and then just open up your awareness to any sensations that you notice in the scalp. So we're just looking for any naturally occurring physical sensation. Oftentimes they'll manifest as temperature. You might feel warm or cool. Sometimes you'll feel air movement on the scalp, from the air movement in the room. Might feel that on the hair or the scalp. And then sometimes there are sensations on the surface of the skin. Sometimes a tickle or an itch or a pulsation. So we just allow all of that to be known by awareness. And at the same time, we're not judging as to whether these are desirable sensations or undesirable or good or bad. We're just objectively observing. So in this way, we kind of observe as they arise. They last for a moment and then they pass away or change into something else. So we observe these sensations. One thing we can do is to look for tension anywhere in the scalp. And sometimes we'll notice that there is in fact tension there, and we can then let that go. We hold tension in all sorts of places in the body quite habitually. Usually we don't notice, so by focusing on different parts of the body in this way, we can release that tension, just start to set ourselves free. And there's a direct connection between the tension in the body and the feelings of agitation or dis-ease in the mind. So to let go of tension is to let go of stress and anxiety. And now from the scalp, let's guide our awareness downward, let it pass down into the forehead. And sometimes it's helpful to try to feel that movement of awareness. There's kind of a warm flow there as awareness travels from one part of the body to the next. So feeling awareness as it moves down into the forehead, and feeling it as it moves into the temples. It continues to travel downward into the eyebrows and into the eyes. And so once again, we just establish this awareness of any sensations in these parts of the body. Temperature, air movement, sensations on the surface of the skin. Again, with objectivity, not looking for right or wrong or good or bad, Just looking objectively. This is the experience of the present moment. And if there's tension, maybe your brow is furrowed, maybe your temples are tight, or sometimes we discover that our eyes are squinted a little bit. So discovering this tension, again, you can just let that go. We're not looking at tension as an enemy or something to be disliked. We're just noticing, oh, this isn't needed here at this time. We can let that go. This isn't needed there at this time. We can let that go. And we lighten our burdens in this way. So continue to observe the sensations even after releasing the tension. And now from the temples, we'll guide the awareness downward into the ears. Feel that awareness moving. Feel it flooding the ears with awareness of sensation. And I'll start to name a few areas of the body as I guide us through. And with each of these areas of the body, just bring your awareness to the sensations and notice and release any tension. You can kind of just do that as a very automatic, natural process. Observe and release, or sometimes we say no and let go. So awareness is in the ears, and we bring awareness forward from the ears. We feel it moving through the cheekbones and into the face. And then from the eyes, we can feel as the awareness passes down, moves through the nose, it travels down through the lips and mouth and chin. So we're experiencing sensations here now in the face, in the jaws, observing as sensations arise and pass away. We also become aware that these sensations are really here all the time, but unless we're focusing and looking for them, we generally don't notice them at the surface level of consciousness. So this is helpful. And if there's tightness in your jaws, if your teeth are clenched or your lips are pursed, you can let that go. Continue observing. We'll guide the awareness downward from the chin down into the neck. You feel it kind of flowing downward, almost as if you swallowed something warm and pleasant. Just feel it traveling down into your throat. And then from there, moving outward through the sides of the neck and the back of the neck. Just observing sensations, letting the tension go. And from the neck, allowing the awareness to flow down into the shoulders. Allow it to spread through the shoulders and be aware of the sensations here. Reminder, we're observing most often temperature, air movement, and sensations on the surface of the skin. Now here in the shoulders, if you're leaning against a chair, you might notice that feeling of contact between the shoulders and the chair. Or you might notice the feeling of contact between your shoulders and your clothing. So we're just opening up to all the sensations that can be known. And again, releasing tension, letting the shoulders drop if they're shrugged. And then from the shoulders, we can allow the awareness to drift downward into the upper arms. And we just observe the biceps for a moment, sensations there. Let the tension go. Rotating inward to the inside surface of the upper arms. Observe, let go. Rotating around to the triceps, the backs of the arms. Just observing and releasing. And sometimes as we observe different parts of the body, it may not seem like any tension is present, but it can be helpful to go through the process of releasing tension anyway. And just doing it for for good measure, and we'll often notice that, yeah, there actually was some tension to release that I wasn't really identifying. So you can stay with that practice. Just know and let go everywhere awareness moves. And from the upper arms now, allow awareness to flow through the elbow joints. Feel that soothing awareness moving through the forearms, moving downward into the wrists. Allow that awareness to continue to move from the wrists into the hands. And then we feel sensations in the heels of the hands, in the palms of the hands. If you're sitting and your hands are touching each other or touching your legs, you might notice that feeling of contact in the hands. Moving around to the tops of the hands, we can observe sensations there. Moving through the fingers now. And then finally bringing our awareness down into the fingernails. If we focus there, just remain patient. Continue to observe. You might notice some very subtle sensations. So we're getting to know all of these sensations in our own bodies. From the fingernails, let's bring our awareness together up to the top of the chest. You can start by just moving across the collarbones and then letting the awareness flow downward. You feel it moving down through the chest, all the way down to the base of the sternum, moving outward through the rib cage now. Really try and stay aware of these sensations as we move, and not drifting off, but remaining attentive. From here, from the rib cage, we can bring awareness to the underarms. And being aware of the underarms, allow the awareness to move down through the sides of the body, all the way to the waist, observing and releasing. And then we can bring the awareness forward into the belly. And just observe here, observe the belly. As we breathe, the belly rises and falls with the in-breath and the out-breath. Sometimes there's a feeling of expansion and contraction, a feeling of fullness. Allow any tension in the belly to go. Many of us hold tension habitually in the belly, so just release. Let the belly be relaxed. And then from the belly, we'll make a move around to the top of the back. So maintain that continuity of awareness. And with awareness in the back, you bring it to the base of the neck. And then allow it to move down through the shoulder blades and through the upper third of the back. Again, just being aware, letting tension go. Moving downward through the middle third of the back. Moving downward through the lower third of the back. And as we move awareness through, again, it's awareness of sensation without judgment. Remaining objective and letting tension go. But for some of us, there might be sensations in the back that we consider difficult or unpleasant. There might be a little pain or fatigue. And so as we start to judge these sensations as good or bad or wanted or unwanted, our relationship to them changes. And it can be difficult to remain objective, and it can be difficult to let go of tension. So it's helpful to hold these areas in our expansive awareness. And just being aware there are difficult sensations in this area. Can this be okay? Can I just allow this to be as it is without needing to react to it in any strong way? And we find that just by asking that simple question, and hanging out to see if we can do it, we find, yeah, in most cases, we can just allow that to be. It doesn't mean we're pretending to like it. It just means we're allowing what is already true in our experience to be known with acceptance. So this is a very helpful and important teaching. So just to hold any discomfort in the back in that expansive awareness. Understand that this is the truth of the present moment. You're not condoning. You're just observing what is true without resisting. And in this comes a great deal of freedom and peace. And then you might find that you can let go of the tension around these areas and find yourself feeling even more free. And now from the back, we can move our awareness downward again. Move it down into the sit bones. Move it down through the hips. Move it around through the pelvis. Observing again. And anywhere you discover discomfort in the body, you can use that same technique that we used with the back. Moving from the pelvis now, allowing the awareness to flow down into the thighs. We observe the thighs, the top surface or the uppermost facing surface of the thighs. The sensations from the hip joint all the way down to the knees. And we rotate outward to the outside surface of the thighs. And same practice, observe, know and let go. Now the underside of the thighs, both right and left, observe, know and let go. And then the inside surface of the thighs, again from the tops all the way down to the knees. Observe. And then guide that warm feeling of awareness through the knees. Let it pass through the knee joints. Let it flow downward through the calves. Let it flow through the shins. And everywhere this awareness moves, you become aware of sensation and you also release tension. So this is a very wonderful, a very optimistic, very cheerful practice. Sometimes we become aware of a feeling of joy, a feeling of gratitude as we move through in this way. Allow the awareness to flow down through the ankles now. Feel it moving into your feet. And then in the different parts of the feet, we observe the heels. The sensations in the heels are different from those in the soles of the feet. And those sensations differ from the sensations in the balls of the feet. And then we rotate to the top surface of the feet and observe. We become aware of the toes. And then finally we bring our awareness down into the toenails. And again, the objective here is to simply observe. Just observe sensation. And sometimes we'll start to notice very subtle sensations in the toenails. Almost just like a little pulsation or a feeling of energy. So this helps us to sharpen our awareness. From the toes now, let's all bring our awareness once again up to the top of the head and to the area of the scalp. But this time, at your own pace, you can just move your awareness back down through your body. So you can do this quickly if you'd like, or you can do it slowly. Sometimes it's helpful to use your natural respiration as a way of moving through the body. You can say on the in-breath, I will observe the scalp. On the out-breath, I will release tension. On the next in-breath, I will observe the face. On the out breath, I will release tension. And you can move down through the body part by part in this way. You find that in just a very brief moment, you can observe these sensations and let tension go. Some of us will notice as we move down through the body again that there are places where we let the tension go a few minutes ago, and now it has reappeared in some way. And so this is actually something very noteworthy. It's a very positive thing to become aware of. As I said before, our emotional experiences also trigger physical experiences. Feelings of stress or worry or fear or anger. Any of these very natural human emotions will also trigger a physiological response on the body. You'll tighten up, hold tension. Then, even if you're not thinking about the thing that caused the tension in the body is causing the emotion to return. So that's why we sometimes have this feeling of lingering dis-ease without really being able to put our fingers on what is exactly the problem. So with this practice, we notice these places of tension and we release it over and over and over. Anytime we notice, we find that we feel more and more free. Eventually, this will change the habit pattern of the mind so that you will not have the habit of holding tension, you'll have the habit of releasing it. So there will be a moment of awareness of sensation, and the next moment will be just dropping any tension and experiencing yourself moving into freedom. So just take the awareness through the body. And once you've had a chance to move all the way through, at least once, then let's bring our awareness together up to the base of the nose, the little patch of skin there beneath the nostrils and above the upper lip. And we observe that patch. Let's bring all our awareness here. And now we can expand the awareness just a little bit further to include the rings of the nostrils. So we feel the rings of the nostrils and the little patch of skin beneath them. And then we can expand the awareness a bit further to include the nasal passages. And so now you can picture this triangular area of the nose where we are focused. And we're just focused on the movement of respiration right now. As you breathe in through the nose, just be aware that you're breathing in. And as you're breathing out, just be aware that you're breathing out. So just stay with the movement of the breath, breathing in, breathing out, breathing in, I know I am breathing in, breathing out, I know I am breathing out. And we just stay with that movement of the breath, letting our awareness just be fully focused on that movement of the breath. Try to stay with the breath for its full duration, noticing with the in-breath that it begins, then it slows and pauses momentarily, and then it reverses direction and it becomes the next out-breath. And you stay with the whole out-breath, observing as it begins and slows and pauses, and then it becomes the next in-breath. So we observe this continuous flow, this continuity of awareness. As you're observing the in-breath and the out-breath, open up your awareness to the feeling of touch anywhere in this triangular area of the nose, the feeling of touch as the air passes through or passes over. Feeling of touch is present. And then observing that feeling of touch, you find that you naturally open your awareness to more subtle levels of sensation. So see if you notice anything more subtle in the breath, breathing in, you might notice the air is drier. Or sometimes breathing in, you notice the air is cooler. And when you breathe out, the air is more moist, or you may notice that it is warmer. So we have all of these different subtleties of sensation and movement of the breath, and we can just be aware. And this is all we need to focus on. As we focus on the breath, we remain with the breath. It's inevitable that some distractions will come up. A lot of times we'll notice them as sounds. We'll hear sounds from outside or sounds from in the room here. And those can pull the awareness away from the breathing momentarily and be taken over to where the distraction is. But in the moment you notice that, again, this is a very important part of the practice and very helpful. The moment you notice a distraction of sound, just with awareness, bring your awareness back to the triangular area of the nose and return your awareness to the breath. And you'll find that the sensations that distracted you, the sound, it just takes care of itself. It goes away. So just return. Each time you're distracted by a sound, take note of that, and then guide the awareness back to the breath. You might even smile each time you do that because you are strengthening your practice. And then sometimes we'll be focusing on the nose and we'll be distracted by a sensation somewhere in the body, a strong physical sensation. Maybe fatigue or discomfort or a tickle or an itch of some sort. And these physical sensations can also distract us. So in the moment of noticing that, it's a wonderful moment. In the moment of noticing, just guide your awareness back to the breath, back to the movement of the breath, the touch and sensations of the breath. And sometimes you'll become aware that you're distracted really just by the mind itself, imagining things or remembering or planning. So again, this is the third aspect of distraction. If you notice it, wonderful. This is a moment of awakening. In that moment of noticing the distraction in the mind, gently guide the awareness back to the nose. Reestablish that awareness. Allow the thoughts in the mind to just cease on their own. Reestablish awareness of the movement of the breath, the touch, and the sensations of the breath. And let's continue to work this way together. We'll meditate in silence together for a few minutes and just return your awareness as often as you need to. In a few minutes I'll sound the bell to end the meditation. Good job, everybody. Take your time coming out of meditation. Feel free to get up or stretch or move around however you'd like to. A little movement back into the joints. Sometimes they get a little sleepy as we hold still. One thing I learned after doing a couple of long-term retreats was my habit was to kind of readjust my body fairly frequently, because I would feel fatigue in one place or another, or maybe discomfort in one place or another. And so I would readjust pretty frequently, and one of the things that I realized was that it really never made it any better for more than about 30 seconds. So it's like I'd change, I'd kind of go through that whole process, and then it was like 30 seconds later, okay, it's as bad as it was before, if not worse. And so some of that expansive awareness practice was really helpful with that. It's just realizing, you know, if this is the way the body feels right now. And I know I'm not doing damage to it or injuring the body, so it's nothing like that. It's just this is the feeling of being in my body right now and in this meditation posture that I'm choosing to sit in. And so you start to become aware that, yeah, you can just accept, you know, this is the way it feels right now, and that can be okay. It isn't necessary to always, you know, okay, I'm going to change this, I'm going to make it better, especially when you discover that it usually doesn't make it any better. And then maybe paradoxically you discover that the more you hold still, the more that pain goes away. It's kind of a neat thing. So, but that was great. We did about 30 minutes together. And one of the things you did as we were doing this meditation is your brain waves are functioning and firing in a different way now than they were when we sat down in here. The meditation practice measurably changes the brain waves. It starts to, and the science around this is fascinating because there's more and more of it all the time. But what it does is that, you know, the brain lights up in certain areas around negative emotions or around fear or sadness or depression or anger. These centers in the brain, scientists can observe this and say, yeah, this is you being mad, this is you being fearful, etc., etc. Well, they notice among people who meditate, and usually the magic kind of the barrier to get over is about 20 minutes of meditation. Once you get over that 20-minute mark, those centers in the brain around the difficult emotions, they start to quiet down, and centers in the brain that are around more positive emotions, they start to become more active, just through the process of meditation. So we feel more peaceful, we feel free, we feel optimistic, kind of happy sometimes. It's just a neat thing to observe that. So it's actually happening in our meditation. Just a quick quote from C.S. Lewis. I thought it was a neat one. He said, "You can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending." So I like that. I think it applies to Dhamma practice. That it's never too late to change the way we do things or the way we think about things. It's never too late to make positive change in our life. I have a handout for tonight. Today, rather. Thank you, Steve. We've had a talk, kind of an ongoing talk here for the this will be the third week of it, where the title has been The Least You Need to Know.
Is this different than Tuesdays?
Yep, this is the new one. Yeah, so the way this works is the Sunday class is the first teaching of the new handout. the new topic, and then the Tuesday class is repeated. So, and you're sure welcome to come to both. Sometimes, thank you very much. Sometimes it's helpful to hear these talks twice, because they help let them sink in. Yeah, so it's available. So you're sure welcome to come Tuesday as well, and to hear it again. Or if this particularly resonates for you, or you think, hey, someone in my life might really connect with that, you can invite them to come. So as I said, this is a continuation of what we've been talking about for the last 2 weeks. I just want to recap a few things. We've been focused on some truths that become self-evident when we look into them with objectivity. And so, to kind of recap where we were talking about this experience of dukkha, and dukkha is a Pali word usually defined as a spectrum of things from, could be mild agitation and dissatisfaction, to a feeling of dis-ease and unsatisfactoriness, stress, all the way to suffering, all the way to real full-blown suffering. So there is this, the reason this is brought up is because it's common to the human experience. Everyone experiences this dukkha at different times in their lives. It doesn't mean that that's all life is dukkha, but it means that it shows up enough that we feel like it would be helpful to do something about it so that we can be happier more and that we can suffer less. And so that's a wholesome desire. We want to feel better. We want to make positive changes in our own lives. And then, of course, every time we do that, sometimes I say the work we do on ourselves is the work we do for everybody else, So if I work on myself, how can I be more patient and tolerant and, this kind of thing? Well, that theoretically helps everybody else around me if I do it right. So it's this awareness that there is this thing called dukkha, and it's prevalent in the human experience. The second truth is that dukkha does have an observable cause, which is wonderful, because if it has an observable cause, it means we can also observe what will end it. So that cause and effect thing is very important and very helpful. So dukkha has an observable cause, and the cause, there's kind of three things, like three sides of a triangle that work together to make up this cause. Tanha, which means craving, upadana, which means clinging, and dosa, which means aversion. So these three things, we boil down and use the word attachment to apply to these three things. It's just a little easier than saying tanha, upadana, and dosa, but when we say attachment, we know that it includes those three aspects. And we see that those really are kind of like, they really are interrelated, even though you could see that tanha, or craving, seems like the exact opposite of aversion, of dosa or aversion, but really wanting something to be and wanting something not to be is still wanting something. So they really overlap each other. This attachment, it's helpful to be aware of it and how it shows up at different times in our lives and in different situations. The Pali word for, and then the third truth there with dukkha is that when craving or attachment ceases, when we let go of the attachment, then the dukkha ceases along with it. So that's very optimistic. To the degree that we can let go of our attachments, to that same degree, our suffering will cease. So it's helpful to know that, because it kind of gives us something to frame it with and work toward. But it's also, again, optimistic, because we see that there's a path out of it. So then, the Pali word nibbana is the experience of the cessation of suffering. And as I pointed out last week, but I think this is a real helpful visualization, the Pali word nirvana, or nibbana, in nirvana is Sanskrit, nibbana is the Pali, it means cessation of suffering. But the literal translation is quenching or blowing out. So the image of holding a red hot coal in your hand and burning your hand and then submerging it into a bucket of ice water, and that instant release, that instant, oh, it's so much better. That's kind of what nibbana is like, is the experience of letting go of these attachments. So those are some of the key things that we've been working with, those terms and that process. And then we start to become aware of if there's attachment, it's like, well, where is that coming from? What's the origin of the attachment? We become aware that whenever there's attachment, there is someone there who's getting attached. So if there's attachment in my life, I am the one who is attaching. And so we start to become aware of this very close relationship between attachment and between kind of the manifestation or the ideas about the self. In the teaching, they call it ahankara and mamankara, which means the activity of I-making and mind-making. So as you just kind of navigate your daily life, you're looking around at different things, and as you interact with them, at least in your mind, you're thinking, well, this is my car, and I want to have this for dinner tonight, and I want my friend to understand the discussion we had the other night, and this body, it's achy and it's mine. And so a lot of this I-making and mind-making is kind of the way we tend to look at things, the way we tend to frame things in our personal experience. But what we notice is that there is a direct correlation between the degree of I and mine and me and ahankara and mamankara and the amount of suffering that we experience. So if we're able to let go of just a few percent of our ahankara and mamankara, I-making and mind-making, to that degree, we're able to free ourselves up a little bit. So it's not the kind of thing where you have to say, all right, starting tomorrow, no more I, no more me, no more mine. But you might approach it instead as saying, well, starting now, I'm going to be aware of the arising of the I and the me and the mine in these moments of attachment, and just be aware of that interaction. And then say to yourself, is there any of that I could let go of? Is there any bit of that I could put down and set myself free? And we find, yeah, most of the time there are aspects of it that we can. And if there's any parts of it where sometimes we say, well, I'm really engaged in this relationship with this other person, and we can be self-aware that, yeah, there's a lot of attachment around that. So we're thinking, am I supposed to let go of caring about the relationship or something like that? And the answer is no. The answer is to just be aware of that interplay of I, me, and mine, the interplay of the self in all of that, and how it might make things more difficult in some cases. And we might learn from that there's ways that we can improve our relationships by letting go of some of that attachment to I and me and mine. One way that might happen is if you've ever had an argument with a partner. A lot of times there's this feeling I'm right and that person's wrong, and then we kind of have this feeling where I need to prove this, or I need to get the other person to kind of acknowledge that I'm right and you're wrong. Well, that kind of a thing. There's an example of ahankara and mamankara, I-making and mind-making. It makes that dynamic of a common disagreement with a partner turn into a bit of an issue, turn into a bit of a problem. But sometimes we're able to just say, well, you know what? Yeah, I guess I was probably wrong, or maybe I didn't understand it, but I let go. And then it's like, wow, well, you're able to really move back into the relationship and continue making forward progress. So it can just be simple things. It doesn't have to be Doesn't have to be real, massive life changes. Just these simple things are so helpful. And then I shared the phrase, what is true without thought? That is in the Zen tradition, that's called a koan. And what it is a statement that doesn't really have an answer that can be provided through rational discourse, but it's an answer that has to be intuited. And so the purpose of a question like this is to kind of get us to shut down the analytical processes of the mind and just to experience the answer. So if I say, what is true without thought? We become aware that, the way I think about things is what I usually consider to be the truth of those things. But if you're asked, well, what if you let go of the thinking about it? How does your experience change? If you let go of the judgments that you're making, if you let go of the classifications of good and bad and right and wrong and, evil or whatever they might be, becoming aware of that is helpful. What is true without thought? So then, I want to move on to today's handout and to talk about something called the 3 characteristics. And we find this coming up frequently in the teachings as something that is important and helpful to understand. So a way that I like to phrase this when I write about it is to consider everything is impermanent, everything is impersonal, and everything is imperfect. And we'll talk about this a little bit. The first one is pretty easy, impermanent. Everything is impermanent, and I'll just read from the handout here a little bit. Everything is impermanent, right? It's true at the molecular level, like a solid rock appears to be permanent, but it's made out of countless atoms. And those atoms are made of smaller particles, protons, neutrons, nuclei, and physicists have determined or identified that even smaller particles within the protons, neutrons, and nuclei exist. And all of those particles are in motion all the time. Impermanence is really what allows everything to be. We don't always see it at the physical level. When we touch and hold a rock, that seems like a pretty permanent, fixed thing. But really we understand that it's true, that everything is in a state of flux. And on just a simple basic level, if things were not impermanent, none of you would have been able to come here today, because you would be permanently somewhere else, right? Or, if things weren't impermanent, you wouldn't be able to heal from an illness or an injury, kind of a thing. So impermanence is one of the characteristics of life. It's one of the characteristics of being in this world. And so it's helpful to be aware. Impermanence means nothing stays the same for even 2 consecutive seconds, and that everything is in a constant state of change and flux. Our bodies, our environment, our minds, and even our beliefs. So think about that one. Not only is the environment changing, things that we put together out of material elements, they start to change and decay over time, and they eventually will break down and become something else. We could see that with trees as they grow and become a large tree, and eventually they die, and then they kind of rot away to nothing. They become soil, they become food for insects and things like that. So all those kinds of things, these physical or material elements are changing. But if you think about what changes even faster, our minds and our beliefs. Our thoughts that we're having right now are different from the thoughts we were having 10 seconds ago, and they're certainly different from the thoughts we were having yesterday, and they'll be different this afternoon than they are now. And so our minds, based on inputs, based on what we're thinking about, they're changing all the time. And even our beliefs change. We might think at some point in time that, idea X is a really good idea. And then a few months might go by and we say, you know what, idea X is maybe not a good idea. And so something happened that changed our opinion or changed our beliefs. So not only are material things in the universe changing, but our minds are changing even faster than any of that. Alan Watts, great Zen teacher, little quote from him: "Man suffers because of his craving to possess and keep forever things which are essentially impermanent. This frustration of the desire to possess is the immediate cause of suffering." So let me read that again because I kind of botched it. Man suffers because of his craving to possess and keep forever things which are essentially impermanent. This frustration of the desire to possess is the immediate cause of suffering. I've also heard it said that you could define anger as thwarted desire. So if you want something and you can't get it, that's the origin of anger. But I think this gives us some insight into the desire to possess things that are impermanent, but we think we want to possess them in a permanent way. I had my daughter gave me a coffee mug for Christmas, and it's a one-of-a-kind mug. It's made by someone who does ceramics and makes a cup, and every cup is different. There's no two that are alike. And so she gave me this coffee cup, and it's beautiful. I really like it. And I think it was on the second time that I washed it that I just put it into the dish strainer, and then I chipped the lip of the cup right where I'd be drinking from now on. And so right away with it, there was this feeling of, oh no, that I chipped the cup, and I was like feeling bad about it. And it reminded me of an old story that was told by Ajahn Chah. He's a teacher in the Thai forest tradition. I quote him fairly often. He's just excellent in terms of his teaching. But there's a little story about Ajahn Chah and his apparent attachment to a certain drinking glass. Sitting around with some other Buddhist monks, nuns, and lay students discussing the Dhamma and enjoying some tea, someone asked Ajahn Chah something like, "You've been teaching us about impermanence and how everything is constantly changing. You've told us that being attached to anything in this transient world will always cause us to suffer. Yet it appears that even you, who has renounced all worldly possessions, have become attached to that special drinking glass." And Ajahn Chah replied, "It is true, I do enjoy this drinking glass. I like the way it holds my tea. I admire the way the sun shines off of it, at times creating tiny rainbows. This is my favorite glass. But I do not cling to it, because to me this glass is already broken. I know that my time with it is temporary and precious, so I enjoy this glass while it lasts. But I am fully aware that eventually it will fall from the shelf or be knocked over and shatter. And when that happens, I will say, of course." Kind of a neat way of looking at it. And some of the wisdom of impermanence, it's neat in how it works in dual ways. On the one hand, if we're suffering, if we're feeling ill, if we're in the middle of a real tough challenge in our lives, we can remind ourselves of the truth of impermanence and remember, this is not going to last forever. This will pass. This will change. And sometimes I really remind myself of that. If I'm caught up in something that's a super big challenge for me, something that's really difficult, sometimes I'll sit with that in meditation and I'll say, okay, I'm just going to set my sights out, 30 days. 30 days from now, this will feel completely different. And so let me just try to be at peace with what I can do in each moment of each day. But I know 30 days from now that this will be different. I will feel better. This will be okay. So sometimes just counting on that impermanence is helpful. The other thing that impermanence does is when we're aware of it, is it changes our relationship to everything else around us that is beautiful. Because we know that, the moments that we spend with friends or loved ones, that those don't last forever, and that soon our friend might have to leave, or people we love pass away sometimes, and eventually everyone does. And so the awareness of impermanence can also make the things that we experience much more beautiful, because we know they're not going to last forever. So it's like to look at the lilacs in the spring. Part of what makes them so wonderful is that that they're not going to be there in a few weeks. That it's just a temporary thing, and so we take it in at that moment. So this can also help us to be much more mindful of what's going on in our lives and appreciating things at a much higher level. So impermanence.
Sometimes that stuff, it's very trying, like when your kids are younger, and when they're older, to let go of something and not try to control,
Mm-hmm.
and to have to think like, okay, now is this really gonna matter in a month or a year or 10 years?
Yeah.
And all that time that you spend being upset about.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And if you're a parent, you also know that a huge amount of your mental, your psychic energy around your children is just worrying about their well-being. It's a huge
Mhm.
part of it for so many parents. And my daughter Julie, I've shared the story. I think most of you know it, but she had done some missionary work over in Uganda a couple of years ago. And then about a year ago, she did some mission work over in Dahouk, which is just north of Mosul in Iraq. And so she had made the decision to quit her job, sell all of her stuff, move over to Dahouk, and to just full-time work with the refugees who were coming across mostly the Syrian border. She wanted to work with the women and girls who were being tortured and trafficked and abused in all sorts of horrific ways. And Julia's, she's really quite a good ballerina, and so one of the things she wanted to do was go over there and teach the little girls ballet as a way of helping them heal from their trauma and to give them something, kind of a bigger purpose. And, so for me, there was a lot of that fear of, my daughter leaving and not wanting that to happen. But as long as I was holding on to that and kind of trying to think of, maybe I can talk her out of it, maybe she won't go. Well, there was suffering around that. Yeah. And then when I got to the point where I realized, this is something she really wants to do. And it's a very noble thing. It's like, yeah, how many 26-year-olds are willing to give up a good job in management that she had, and kind of all the comforts that you would want, and really kind of a neat life for a kid that age. For her to want to do that, it's a very noble thing. But when I came to the conclusion that this is what she wants to do, this doesn't have anything to do with me, and that I love her and I support her. And in the event that something horrific happened over there, how wonderful it would be for a person to lose their life in the pursuit of something so important, so special. So I started to come to terms with it in that way. But these teachings have really helped me with that.
So, Ken, would that be your
Ahankara and Mamankara.
That would be your
Yeah. There's Ahankara and Mamankara there, where it's just I making and mind making and kind of obsessing about it at
But
that
you can't
level.
have the mind without the eye.
Right.
Yeah.
exactly.
sister words or?
Yeah, because unless there's an I, there can't be a
Be a
mine that belongs to the I.
Okay.
So again, these are, these are teachings that just sort of help us navigate through these bigger difficulties of our lives, that we start to play with it a little bit and we realize, yeah, when I take here's what I want out of the situation, of course I want my daughter to be safe and well and happy. However, she's an adult and has made this decision on her own, and so the only thing that I can really do is to make peace with that, to allow what is true to be true. And when I start to push against it with aversion and resistance, that's when I suffer. When I look at it with wisdom and say, well, this is the way it's going to be, I feel better. Doesn't mean I'm still not, very much caring about her, but it helps. So one question to ask is, what is your relationship to the truth of impermanence? If you look for lasting, permanent, unchanging satisfaction in things which are inherently impermanent, you'll experience this dis-ease, dissatisfaction, stress, and unhappiness, because things do change. And it is an absolute law of nature or the universe. When we understand impermanence, we will be able to make the most out of every moment with friends and loved ones. We can also endure difficulties knowing this too shall pass. Once in a while, we can even appreciate difficult experiences for what they are, important moments of life. Embracing the truth of impermanence, we can set ourselves free. And Bodhidharma, he says, not creating delusions is enlightenment. So what he's saying is, whenever we can look at things through the eyes of wisdom, not through the eyes of delusion, we are on a path to enlightenment. We are enlightening ourselves in that moment. The second aspect of this is that things are impersonal. And in this one, sometimes people have a little trouble grasping this at first, but I think it's a helpful and important teaching. So we'll try to explain it in a way where everyone understands it, and we should be able to do that easily with the time that we have left today. So I'll just read for a little bit. Everything is impersonal. Events unfold lawfully. Everything happens due to countless causes and conditions coming together at any given moment as phenomena. Everything that comes together to constitute a human being, the feeling of me, is subject to the same lawful unfolding. So if we think about it, the more we're caught up in I and me and mine, the more we think that everything is really personal, that whatever happens is it's due directly somehow to our interaction with that thing. Excuse me. But what we can do is look at the fact that things tend to unwind in a fairly predictable, logical, natural way in the environment, right? And so that most of the stuff that's happening around us is happening because of laws of physics, because of laws of nature, including the things that are happening with us. Now what we do is we start to think, I can change that. I can make things happen the way I want them to be, just because I choose to do it. So, but because things are impersonal in their essence, we can't control everything. Understanding the impersonal, not myself nature of things, we can learn to accept ourselves and others. And this one, I think, is really huge and important. Two practices in my life that have been critical is trying to accept myself for who I am. This person that I am, I was born, and due to the DNA that I received from my parents and my ancestors. I have certain physical and mental and emotional characteristics. And it's just funny to see how that shows up as true in many cases. I have a cousin who I have not seen for at least 40 years and have had no contact with. My mother met with her a couple of weeks ago and found out that my cousin is doing almost exactly what I am doing here over in St. Paul. And that she does meditation classes, and that she has some sort of a meditation center that she's working in, and that she's into yoga and all these other things. And it's just like, wow, you know,
Wow, really?
what are the odds of that, you know? But that's kind of a little insight into this impersonality thing. I mean, it's the DNA. It's like, wow, there's really something powerful in that. And DNA is just kind of part of the larger DNA of the whole universe, the laws of physics and things like that. So for me, what this has led to is that, okay, I can't control everything. And so because of that, I need to learn to accept things, or I'll be in constant conflict in my life, you know, if that makes sense. So it's, you know, so hey, here's me, here are my imperfections, you know, and there's a bunch of them. And for so much of my life, I beat myself up about them, you know. And it can be everything from looks. I mean, we tend to have a hard time being satisfied with how we look. We always wish we looked better or different. With our money, with our education, with our status, you know, where we live, what we wear, anything. We're always trying to change it. We have this idea that we need to make it better and then we'll be happy. And so working on self-acceptance is so important for us. It's just to realize, you know, this is who I am. And I try and make myself better in the ways that I can. And usually the most successful way to do that is to try and cultivate compassion and loving kindness and appreciative joy and equanimity in my own life. And then I can give this great gift to other people, which is that I can accept them for who they are. As soon as we learn to accept ourselves for who we are, we can accept others for who they are. You know, and really love them for it, not just have it be yeah, I tolerate you, you know, but yeah, you are who you are, and I am who I am. But we can connect in this way. Acceptance. I had an experience when I was in I was actually in a meeting. It was a kind of a large meeting session. And after I'd been in there for a while, I started to feel ill, starting to feel physically sick. And because I felt like I had to stay sitting and kind of keep that to myself, I started to develop kind of a panic attack that was coming along with the feeling of not feeling well. Because, you know, it was like I wanted to keep that a secret. And I thought it was interesting to observe that, even though I was miserable as it was happening. I thought it was interesting to observe that, how those two played off of each other. I feel sick. I don't want people to know that. The result is anxiety, right? After a while, I'd gotten up a couple times, gone to the bathroom, splashed my face with water, you know, tried to feel better. I came back, and the person leading this meeting, you know, couldn't help but notice, and she said, you know, are you okay? I mean, right out loud to the whole group, you know, to me. She said, are you okay? And I said, you know, I'm not feeling very well. I don't feel too good. And it was like right away, as soon as I shared that, there was this outpouring of love and compassion from all these people in the room who I didn't know at all, you know, but all of a sudden this was there. And I thought it was interesting how feeling sick and then adding on this, and I need to hide it, led to tremendous suffering. But when I let go of the I need to hide it and I shared it with the other people, it was just like, it was wonderful. Yeah, I mean, I felt wonderful. And within a few minutes, I was no longer feeling physically sick. But it's interesting how those two things are just so interraveled into one another. You know? So this is part of this, this impersonal. It means take a look at things in an objective way about what's going on in your life. And, sometimes we are the cause of the problems we experience, but really they're just unfolding naturally. And so by becoming aware of that, we can work with them in a more skillful way. Does that make sense about the kind of the impersonality of things? And I really love that statement of just those three things, that everything is impermanent, everything is impersonal, everything is imperfect. So it's not a dismissive thing. It's not at all saying, so I'm not going to love. But what it is, it's saying, hey, so this is the setup here. So how do we use that to open our hearts and to connect with others in a really meaningful way? B. Alan Wallace says, the real source of my suffering is self-centeredness. My car, my possession, my well-being. Without the self-centeredness, the suffering would not arise. It's just so simple. It's just absolutely true. When there are tragic and painful, difficult things happening in our lives, it is not unusual to feel like life is ganging up on us, like we're being singled out as the recipients of misfortune. And though it is true that there is nothing more personal than our own personal experience, notice how the more personally we take things, the more unsatisfactory they are. And when we begin to soften our rigid ideas about who we are, we find that we can relax.
Okay, it seems like if people, there's unfortunately people that take a lot of things personally and they're constantly offended. Whether it's somebody pulls in front of them or whatever, and
Yeah.
that creates a lot of disease.
Mm-hmm.
Disease, where because somebody said something the wrong way it creates a lot of disappointment. And
a lot of arguments around respect, perceived respect, lack of respect.
Exactly.
Road rage seems to me to be kind of an example of that. It's like one person thought that they were disrespected by the other person, and it turns into murder in some cases. So it's like it's a real thing. It's a real thing. So none of this is to say that there's no such thing as a me or an I. Of course there is. But what this is asking you to do is just to look at this process of the I-making and the mind-making and taking everything personally, and just to say, is there any of that I could let go of? So I think I used the example last week of, let's just say in a minute that you had 10 episodes of identifying with something as yours or mine, or something that you needed to have work out in a certain way in order for you to be satisfied. Let's say you had 10 of those in a minute, and let's just say that you were able to let go of one of the 10 because you became aware of this process. You'd be 10% freer right then and there. So it can be a real simple thing. It's just, 10% freer today is great. I'll take it. And then maybe tomorrow I can get a little more than that. But it's being aware of this and to really look at it through the eyes of compassion, not like, hey, you're being admonished and here's all the ways you've been doing things wrong. But it's like, hey, you know what? There's really a much more compassionate path that we can take for dealing with ourselves and our emotions and the people around us. So strong self-identification is necessary for craving and attachment. It is said that our identification with the ego, instead of who we really are, is ignorance. Not stupidity, but more of a colossal misunderstanding. Pema Chodron, you may be familiar with her, wonderful teacher, abbess of a monastery in Nova Scotia in the Tibetan tradition. She says ego could be defined as whatever covers up basic goodness. From an experiential point of view, what is ego covering up? It's covering up our experience of just being here, just fully being where we are, so that we can relate with the immediacy of our experience. Egolessness is a state of mind that has complete confidence in the sacredness of the world. It is unconditional well-being, unconditional joy that includes all the different qualities of our experience. So then to ask that question again, what is your relationship to the truth of impersonality? Sometimes just the thought of it annoys us, and that's a good good indicator that you take yourself to be something you're not. But your true nature is radiant being, luminous, or in Zen, the original mind is what it's called. We are luminous beings, but we are defiled by incoming defilements. Robert Rabin says, a tremendous knowing comes effortlessly into the mind when it falls into silence, when it gives up trying to understand, when its reel of stored images no longer projects abstract pictures onto the clean screen of simplicity. This kind of knowing is transmitted to us as pure revelation, as a clarity untouched by words or other symbols of meaning. When we allow this knowing into our minds, our very lives become as clear and startling as this knowing. So that's just beautiful. I think I'm going to leave it here for today just so we can do our 4 Brahma Vihara practice together, and then I can mention a couple of things in terms of announcements. And then we'll complete the imperfect part next week, which is actually, so it's great to leave off with that because imperfection is, it's actually a really neat practice to study it. So I wanted to mention no open meditation tomorrow or Tuesday, just these 2 mornings. I've got if it happens, I've got a off-site meeting on Monday morning. I'm doing some wellness stuff, and then
Here,
huh?
where? Because it's gonna be.
I know, Somerset, if it happens. Yeah, Somerset, if it happens, it may not. But anyway, I just figured, well, I'll preemptively close the open meditation Monday and Tuesday morning. But right now, unless things get really bad, the Tuesday class is still going to happen. So that'll happen that night. Let's see, what else have I got here? Well, I'll be sending out the February newsletter soon. We're almost at the end of January already. But there will be Reiki training certifications, Reiki level 1, 2, and 3 in February. And then also those classes will be repeating in April. So if anybody's interested in those, there's actually been a lot of people inquiring about those. So
With the Reiki training?
Yeah.
You're gonna have those again later?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, so February we'll do the series 1 through 3,
Okay.
and then April we'll do 1 through 3 again. So that way, I mean, some people might make 1 and 2 in February, and then maybe make 3 in April.
Good.
And then depending on how that goes, or if we have a waiting list of any kind, then I'll just continue to repeat it. So there's that, and then also, and this would be found on the newsletter or on the calendar for Still Knowing Meditation Center, we'll be doing kids, the Mindful Kids program coming up in February as well, which is, well, Karen, you're kind of aware of some of the stuff I did with Kate Barassa and the mindfulness with kids. So that's what we're going to be doing, just getting a group of kids with 1 adult each. And I had a mother and daughter who were here. And I think the daughter's probably about 40, and so she was asking if the mom, if they could come, would they still qualify? And I said, absolutely,
Gladys.
Yeah, so, yep, absolutely. But, so that's gonna be happening too, so if anybody's interested in that, you can check the website for it, or check the newsletter if you've received that, and there's info on it. But I'm really excited about being able to do that, because kids just take to mindfulness and meditation so easily, and I do love that quote by the Dalai Lama. If every 8-year-old was taught meditation, we would end violence in this world within 1 generation. I really think that's true. So, good things coming up.
Need that.
And yeah, and so, all right. Well, let's just spend a moment with the four Brahma-viharas. That word Brahma-vihara, it means highest state or highest place. Sometimes highest states of consciousness is how I usually define it. And so what this is I'll say the words for these four Brahma-viharas, but I just really invite you to try and feel these intensely in your own heart as I recite the words. Just really feel them to the point where they become something that you're really experiencing. And this is a wonderful way to walk out of here at the end of this class, is to be projecting these four Brahma-viharas at yourself and at others. So the first being karuna or compassion, which is we become aware of the suffering of all sorts of beings in this world, living beings, the planet itself. Being aware of the suffering, we're also aware of the intense desire of these beings to be free from suffering. And so we cultivate in our hearts this belief that that can be possible and that we can participate in it in some way. So may all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. And then the second one is to also embrace all beings with the eyes of loving kindness, with a heart of loving kindness or metta. May all beings be surrounded by love and kindness. And then we continue with mudita, which means appreciative joy. May all beings be truly happy and joyful. And then finally, upekkha, which is equanimity. May all beings be equanimous. May they all experience equanimity, which means that they are peaceful and free and balanced to a point where they don't feel craving, clinging, or aversion. They're not experiencing the delusion of those things, but they're in a place of complete balance and freedom and contentment. And finally, may you, sharing this space with me today, I'm so appreciative for your presence. I love sharing this with you, and I'm so grateful for you to be here, take the time to be here. May all of you be truly, truly happy.